What's up, nature lovers? Today we're going to talk about leaf characteristics, especially in terms of houseplants, and how these characteristics affect your plant care in terms of light and water. And so let's get right to it. Welcome to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Kayla, and I talk about caring for houseplants, learning and exploring about native plants, and appreciating medicinal plants. So if any of those topics are of interest to you, please consider subscribing. So some key terms to go over before we get started include transpiration, which is the process in which plants breathe, and through this they lose moisture. Now, plants breathe through stomata, which are usually located on the underside of the leaves. Sometimes certain plants have them on the upper side as well, but not every plant does that. So the important key term here is transpiration, though, because a lot of leaf adaptations have to do with moisture retention or even trying to get water off the leaves and away from fungal and bacterial infections. So we'll get to that in a moment. First, I want to talk about color. Now, the color can tell you quite a bit about how a plant utilizes light where it normally would be in its native environment. So sometimes it's about protection from herbivores, either by camouflage or the appearance of sickliness. Color, like burgundy and purple colors, increase the ability for these plants to absorb light. And an example of that is my shamrock plant, my purple shamrock plant. If you have a plant that tends to put out new foliage that's sort of on a reddish or pinkish or orangish color, that is the plant actually producing anthocyanins, which is basically sunblock for a plant, and that helps protect the new foliage from UV radiation. It can also be a way to make an animal that might be kind of nibbling around think that the new foliage is toxic or unappetizing. And so who knows? We're still kind of learning about that, why plants produce certain colors in their foliage. Lighter colored leaves don't absorb as much light as dark colored leaves. So lighter colored leaves reflect more light, and thus they keep the plants cooler and prevent increased water loss. This includes silver coloring, like on my Silverian Scindapsus pictus, or on my Begonia gryphon, or on my new Senecio that I don't remember the species name, so I'll put it on the screen when I put that plant in. But that one also has a bit of a silvery glaucous sort of texture to it, which we'll get into in a second. Plants like calatheas have patterned leaves, and those leaves act as camouflage by passing herbivores who have a hard time seeing and distinguishing those plants from everything else around them in the dark light of the rainforest floor. Texture can tell quite a bit about plant care. Plants develop an outer layer of protection depending on the conditions that the plant had to evolve in. So we try to understand and mimic those conditions in our homes if we can. The key is to also observe the response you get from placing your plant in a certain spot. Pubescence means fuzzy leaves. Fuzzy leaves help to protect the plant during transpiration. Like I said, when the plant loses water when it breathes. Fuzzy leaves help the plant to be more drought tolerant because the wind would otherwise increase the transpiration. And so basically the wind blows over the fuzzy leaves. The fuzz helps to redirect the wind from actually blowing over the surface of the plant and causing it to transpire faster. Fuzzy leaves can also sometimes serve as protection from sunlight by reflecting it. Glaucous. These are waxy leaves that help to cool the plant and reduce evaporation in dry climates. Powdery leaves fall into this category as well. In moist climates, the waxy leaves help to run the water off the leaves. Scurfy, what a fun word, it reminds me of scurvy. Scurfy includes trichomes, which we see on air plants. Trichomes are tiny little scales that close when the plant is exposed to moisture, and that's when we see the plant turn green, and then they open when they're dried out. and that also gives the plants a gray coloring. Thick-leaved plants like succulents retain a lot of moisture. Overwatering can be easy to do if you don't check the plant first. Other adaptations like rhizomes and tubers or thick root systems like on a bird of paradise also store water for the plants to use to prepare for seasons of drought. Now the opposite of really thick leaves are really thin leaves, like on a coleus. The leaves don't store water, and these plants tend to need watering more frequently. I've noticed on plants that need my attention more often are plants that have thinner leaves, like my coffee tree. They also tend to be a bit more vocal and dramatic when they're thirsty. They can be dramatic. That's when you know you need to water them. Or at least you can use it as a sign when you start to see the plant droop a little. It's time to water it before it actually goes, you know. Observation. Lastly, we have shape. The shape can also tell us a bit about plant care. The width or the size, whether there are holes in the leaves. Sometimes creating holes in the leaves like fenestrations and things like that need to be encouraged as the plant ages. You know, like climbing up a moss pole, for instance, we've seen them. Or if they're out in nature, they're climbing up trees and the plant leaves get bigger and they get lots of holes in them. So we'll go into that. Small leaves can actually be seen to prevent water loss during transpiration because there's less surface area per leaf. Needle-shaped leaves, much like on a Norfolk Island pine or on conifer plants outside, are very effective at this. They're quite drought tolerant. Some large leaf plants like banana trees and palms were actually found to have more water efficiency when their leaves were torn in the wind during times of drought. They lost less foliage, and it's kind of like the same principle of having small leaves means less water loss. Heart-shaped leaves are lovely heart-shaped leaves, or leaves that have a pointed tip, are seen possibly to adapt to the amount of rainfall they would normally receive, and the pointed tips, or drip tips, help to redirect the water from sitting on the tops of the leaves where they could invite fungus and bacteria. They can also help send the water down towards the roots instead. Holes in the leaves may have been adapted to allow more light in to pass through the leaves that are higher up down to the leaves that are lower down. It may also be a way to make an animal coming along looking for some food to think that the leaves have already been nibbled on. When a plant curls its leaves or turns its leaves away from light, it's deflecting the light away and it is trying to reduce its transpiration. So that means it's time to water. For instance, I see my purple shamrock plant, which I've mentioned once or twice already in this video. When I notice that the grow light's on and the leaves are still pointed down, because normally they open up when the light comes on, that means it's time to water because they're trying to conserve their moisture level. If you found this to be quite interesting, please consider subscribing. Thank you for watching and have a good one.